All right, so we'll just let people trickle in as they come in, but we can just get started. So welcome everyone to the National Young Women's Day of Action. This year's theme is humanities and activism. I'm really excited. This is my first National Young Women's Day of Action, both to attend and to host. So I'm really excited to be here. We've got a really awesome panel of artists and activists joining us today. So we'll just jump in, get started. Can everyone see the screen? Everyone good on the screen? Awesome. So we first want to give a thank you to all of our co-sponsors who have made this event possible: the African and African Diaspora Studies Department, the Center for Asian American Studies, the Gender and that's us. We'll thank ourselves. We'll give ourselves a pat on the back. The Gender and Sexuality Center, the Center for Women and Gender Studies, and the Multicultural Engagement Center. So thank you to everyone who's helped promote the panel and plan the panel. We're really appreciative and excited to have your support. And so I wanted to give a brief shout out to some of our weekly events that are very similar to this, so that if you are leaving this event and you're wanting to find more feminist and woman spaces to join, we have our Finding Our Voice, a virtual women of color discussion group, all about building communities among women of color. And that is in partnership with the CMHC. That is in partnership with the CMHC on every Monday, 12 to 1:30, and it is virtual right now, so you can join anywhere. We also have our Feminist Fridays, hosted by one of our student interns and my personal fashion icon, Silvana, pictured on the right with her chico, Kiari, who leads Feminist Fridays every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. on Zoom with the link attached. But Liz, if you are able to, if you want to drop the link so people have it in the chat. She is a third-year PhD student in comparative literature whose research focuses on queer and trans Latinx pop culture. At Feminist Fridays, we discuss a variety of topics that deal with the intersections of factors such as gender, race, sexuality, class, citizenship, and ability. Past topics discussed this semester include back to campus COVID concerns, reproductive rights and Hurricane Ida, what is Latinidad, canceling Latinidad, brown problematics, queer TV, liberal capitalism, QT BIPOC fashion and music, Pereo 101, origins and appropriation. Future topics will include Halloween cosplay / cultural appropriation, food, decolonizing plates and attitudes, Black feminist scholarship and theory, reality TV, by who, for who, how do different communities get represented, and I know she's got so much more planned. So make sure to come to their next meeting. That's Fridays, 1 to 2 p.m. On Zoom. Highly recommended. It's a really good, great discussion group. So without further ado, we'll go into our land acknowledgement. In honor and recognition of the land we are currently on, this land is traditionally inhabited by Comanche, Cohotecan, Apache, Tonkawa, Mexica, and all other tribes not explicitly stated. We honor Yanawana, water of the spirit and spirit of the water that flows through Central Texas, and all ancestors and guardians of this place. And we acknowledge that Native peoples and their descendants are here with us today. And we understand that land acknowledgements are not an end, but rather a start to learning from, listening to, and following the leadership of Indigenous people, understanding Indigenous communities are part of our past, present, and future. So now I'll hand it over to Anchita, one of our awesome student interns, to introduce the panel, or well, introduce this event.
Hi, everyone. Again, we welcome you to National Young Women's Day of Action 2021. Our theme being humanities and activism. Now, this theme is really important, especially seeing activism isn't always found in the voting booth. It can be found in seeing representation on screen, reviving traditional arts, and even exemplifying lesser known narratives. Just walking around Austin, I see political ideas being spread around through any medium, even something as simple as just graffiti on the sidewalk. I hope y'all will join us and listen to our speakers on their own experiences with arts as a conduit for social change. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Anchita. And so now I'll get to introduce the panel. So first up, Delita Martin is a full-time artist based out of Huffman, Texas, where she creates in her studio Black Box Press. She received a BFA in drawing from Texas Southern University and an MFA in printmaking from Purdue University. Primarily working from oral traditions along with vintage and family photographs. As a source of inspiration, Martin's work explores the power of the narrative impulse. Her finished works combine collaging, drawing, painting, printmaking, and sewing techniques, placing her figures amid patterns to visually represent what it looks like when we become the spiritual other. When we pray or meditate, we enter the veilscape. Martin's layering of technique and material, as well as her use of pattern and color, signifies a liminal space, the space between the waking life and the spirit life. By fusing this visual language with oral storytelling in this different space, she offers other identities and other narratives for women of color. Nicole Neidhart, with a Master's of Fine Arts from OCAD University. Oh my gosh, not Delita. Sorry, Delita, we already introduced you. I don't know why it's not showing me, but with a Master's of Fine Arts from OCAD University and a Bachelor of Fine Arts and Business minor from the University of Victoria, Nicole's Dene identity is the heart of her artistic practice, which encompasses Indigenous futurisms, Dene storytelling, and land-based practices. She works in a variety of media and contexts such as mylar stenciling, installation, mural painting and design, illustration, beadwork, hand poke tattooing, facilitating community engaged art, and book layout and design. She's also the co-founder of the Innovative Young Indigenous Leaders Symposium, as well as Groundswell Climate Collective, a group that is fighting the climate crisis through resiliency and artwork. And last but not least, Miru Yogarajah is a filmmaker, writer, and community benefits organizer at Parkdale Activity Recreation Center. Their work aims to showcase the multifaceted experiences of being a person on the margins and the delicate and intimate experiences they host alongside survival. They received their Master's of Public Policy degree from the University of Toronto in 2019. And before that, they double majored in ethnic studies, political science, and liberal arts honors as a UT alumni, a Texas X, and a GSC X at that. From writing about the revolutionary work of refugee parents to how the pandemic made them reflect on their gender identity, they see healing as a social issue and capture it in writing or on film as their activism. So no, sorry about that. So that is our panel. So if y'all will give me virtual snaps to welcome them, we'll stop sharing for a moment. But yeah, I would love to kick off the panel and just ask y'all to tell me a little about, I know I just introduced you and your artwork, but if you want to talk a little about how you came into your different mediums of filmmaking or writing or visual arts and multimedia, how you came into your artwork, question mark at the end of that statement.
I can go, if that's okay. Yeah. So yes, hook 'em. I haven't done that in a long time. I attended UT Austin, and I think I was a very, very lost human. I thought I was going to go into law and then policy, but ever since I was 8 years old, I always consumed documentaries. It was weird. I would watch true crime documentaries. I would watch any form of docuseries. It always had resonated with me. And I remember when I was in 8th grade, I was in a theater class and I had said, I don't know about being in front of the camera. I can't act, but I loved being behind it. And so then I went on to pursue grad school in Toronto, which is where I was born. And I kind of have this interesting lens because I am Tamil and my parents are Sri Lankan, and I'm the child of refugees, but I grew up in Texas. I lived there for 22 years. And so to come back to Canada, specifically Toronto, which has the largest diaspora of Tamil people in the world, outside of like India and Sri Lanka, it was interesting because I came from literally a place of being apart, but also apart. And so that made it so I would sit in these settings and observe these cultures, because I think cultures are products of survival, and they were really innovative approaches to living. And so I would observe these things. And so I basically have been writing for a very long time, and I would just write for myself, or I'd write articles here and there. And eventually I would write Instagram captions and tweet things. But I had a course in policy, and it was a course about how we came into policy. And I had to present about why I came into policy. And that I basically downed into an Instagram caption. And my friend was like, there is an open call for National Film Board of Canada to submit stories of belonging. So I submitted that story, and National Film Board of Canada wanted to make a short documentary on it. And so that kind of galvanized my entire art career. I mean, I've been doing it, but I was always hesitant to call myself an artist or a writer or a filmmaker, which I don't condone. Just because you don't get institutional validation doesn't mean that you're not any of those things. But that was how I kind of went into film, and I've been in love. But it all started when I was a kid. And I have to say, your kid self or your child self has always known what they wanted. It's usually through external things through which we pursue maybe things that we don't want. But I always had to go back to that kid self. So that's kind of how I got it started in filmmaking and writing and art generally.
I'll go next. I've been creating art since I was 5 years old. I declared myself an artist at that point. So I think my practice has just been an evolution over time. Like I said, I always knew I wanted to be an artist, so it was never, there was never a plan B. It was always going to be, being an artist, being in my own space and creating, and hopefully, being able to support myself in that way. So, yeah.
Hi, my name is Nicole Neidhart, as you know. I also grew up always knowing that I wanted to be an artist. I just kept following that kind of passion and drive ever since I was little, and I was really fortunate to have a really supportive family who kind of helped me follow that passion and dream. But I think what's been so amazing is just the way like this idea of an artist has just shifted and transformed and evolved over time in my life. And I think that's why I always get embarrassed when I like list all the things that I do, because I just feel like I keep trying new things all the time. And I think that's why like I originally got into like painting originally. And then because I was a painter, I was able to help with all these like youth mural projects when I was living in Victoria doing my undergrad. And so I got into mural painting. And then when I came to Toronto to do my master's at OCAD, that's when I really got into like Indigenous futurisms and starting to kind of think about the future worlds that I want to create and inhabit and hopefully manifest in the world. And but the only reason I was able to get here is because I had this like long kind of line of different experiences of working with different Indigenous communities that really shaped the way that I kind of exist in the world. And the reason why I prioritize kind of community over anything else in my practice. And yeah, I think that's kind of the really short and simple reason I got into art. But yeah, I've just kind of always been doing some form of creative practice in my life. So yeah.
Now, I'd love to know a little about if there was ever a time, because I think sometimes, especially growing up, we can see social change as one thing and then art as a separate box, perhaps. So I'm curious if there was ever a time when y'all were questioning whether there was a way to use art for social change, or if that was a moment or a realization that you had to realize about your work, like, oh, maybe it is creating an impact. I'd love to hear about any moments or memories that you, perhaps the first time you saw your art have some sort of visible impact on someone or something.
I think that, at least for me, I have always known and recognized the art that I create as activism because I'm a Black woman. So by nature, what I do is defiant in a way and confrontational in ways. So that I've always known. In terms of the impact of my work, I think I grew to understand that impact. One particular memory I have, I did an exhibition, and I think there was like an elderly group of individuals. They had a bus group and they came to the exhibition. And one of the ladies had tears in her eyes and she says, "Oh my God, you have represented us in all of our glory, our large noses, our large lips, our skin color, our hair, and you've done it in a way where we are beautiful." And so I realized, I think that very moment for me kind of put in perspective what I was really doing, and my work became that much more important.
I guess I can go next. I totally agree with that, actually. I think, yeah, as like an Indigenous woman, I also see like kind of everything that I create as like political and kind of politicized, because as an Indigenous person moving in this world, like there's so many forces throughout history that have tried to wipe out my people and also other Indigenous peoples across North America. And so every time we show up and show that we're there and combat these really horrible and violent stereotypes that Indigenous peoples often face in the United States and in Canada, like it's an act of resistance. And I think that I learned pretty early on that is the power of me creating. And I think when it was really in my face was when I was in my undergrad. And I was like going to school at UVic, and I only had like one other Indigenous person in class with me, and all my profs were white, and it was just really difficult to get the like support we needed to actually create the art we wanted to create and explore the ideas we wanted to create, because they were so locked into these kind of like institutional colonial Western ways of thinking about the world, and that were really harmful to the ways that our communities want to exist in the world. So I think that like seeing that tension so early on just really like made me realize why this work is so important, even if like maybe like you're working in like with a very small group of people, or like even just yourself creating. Like it is an act of resistance. And yeah, it's just something I realized like pretty early on. And then I think with like the mural work though, is when I really understood like how impactful it can be to work with community and like centering community and community's needs in the work that I'm doing. So it's kind of through mural work that I really started understanding the importance of like public art in that context. Yeah.
I think that I realized that the work that I do is political when folks would message me or tell me personally that they haven't seen that depicted before. And the fact that that depiction has not existed until the year 2021 or 2020 or whatever it is really telling of the lack of documentation or the lack of archives of like Tamil people in particular. And yeah, I guess I'm just reminded of it anytime I get a message or someone talks to me about it, and they're just excited to see that exist. And so that's how I see it as political.
Now, I think one of, I've read somewhere, but one of my favorite quotes is like, the political is personal and the personal is powerful. And I see that a lot in the ways y'all are talking about your identities and how you bring those into your work. And the GSC, I think, will know, because we serve women and LGBTQ communities, we're no strangers to the personal and bringing our identities into our work and into the things that we do. And I want to ask if there are times when it's harder than other times to bring those identities into your work.
For me, it's not. My work is an extension of me. Every single day that I walk into my studio, I'm telling my story. I'm telling the story of my people. So it's never an issue in my work.
I think with documentary filmmaking, there's constantly a question of not whether I can bring the identity, but whether it's an exploitation of identity. That's specifically true when working with broadcasters. It's interesting, like Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, they are voyeuristic. I mean, they're literally Canada's broadcasting corporation. And so it's, do I showcase these complications or these difficulties that people like Tamil people have being refugees? Is that an exploitation of their story for entertainment? How do I do that in an informed and consensual way, especially when there's language barriers, or when, what is the length to which I give them in practice informed consent? And so there are, it is not an issue of whether I bring my identity to the table, but whether this is, I'm taking advantage, or people are being taken advantage for this content, and specifically who's hosting the content. That's also really important. So yeah, I've been grappling with that a lot, because it's primarily like a older white audience that consumes like documentaries on when it comes to CBC or even different festivals. That's just the case. And so where do I draw that line?
I think about that a lot too in my work, like especially bringing like Indigenous knowledges into institutions, like even just with like my Master of Fine Arts, and like it's kind of like, how much do you share and how much do you kind of refuse to share, and like how that can be like a form of protection. But yeah, in terms of bringing my identity, like it's the same. It's just like, it is everything that I do. Like it's everything. Like there is no like separation from me and who I am as a Navajo person. I think that I got like a lot of pushback in my creative practice, again, like in my undergrad and even sometimes in my master's, just like thinking about, yeah, when I brought my work into these spaces and I brought Indigenous knowledges into these spaces and how like sometimes it just really didn't fit. And so like having this kind of like institutional like pushback against what I was creating or thinking. And so that was like challenging, but again, like I was always just like very grounded in who I was and where I was creating from.
Let me think how to phrase this question, because I am really interested in, because in creating art, y'all are creating more visibility for these different communities, and visibility also means more people, like a wider audience. And it's, I think that concern of exploitation or misrepresentation. And so, Miru, I think you mentioned like, or I think you and Nicole both mentioned sort of drawing a line at some points, or making sure you draw boundaries and to make sure you protect your communities. I'd love to hear y'all talk more about times when y'all have had to do that, or what specifically, if there's a criteria, or how do y'all gauge that?
Oh, Nicole, do you want to go? Okay. I mean, I think that the way that I practice informed consent is just more extensive when it comes to like journalism or documentary filmmaking. So it's not just saying this is going to be published here, but it's also being like, this will be broadcasted here, this will be published here, and this means X, Y, Z. So I have to do that specifically with communities who may not speak English as their first language, or who may just not have access to that knowledge. We take that for granted. And so that is a way in which I do that. Also, like a lot of people, editors, broadcasters, or not broadcasters, but producers, they don't necessarily allow participants of documentaries to be involved in the editing. And I kind of want that. Not extensively, like I still want creative control over editing and everything, but I do want them to be okay with what's going to be put out. And so that's something that's a really important part to my process, I think. And another thing is people, editors and broadcasters, I haven't done this with broadcasters, but with editors, usually when you publish something, you can't go retroactively and change things, or it's a big deal when you do. But if I publish a piece and someone asks me to change something because it's too much exposure, or they feel at risk or anything like that, I'm very willing to have that conversation with my editors and side with whoever the participant or the person I wrote about. And so, yeah, I recently had an article come out about the employment insurance system in Canada and how it fails the working class. And I had interviewed a participant, somebody for it, who was the primary person throughout the entirety of the story. They originally told me that I could use their name. So it was published with their name, like their full name. And they called me 3 days later after circulating it to their friends and family and said that they are scared now because they did disclose that they were working under the table. And so I went to my editors and asked them, just please take their last name off. And it sounds so simple, but I think in journalism, that's kind of a big deal, because it's changing the story and it's requiring that you disclose you made this edit or removal. And so, yeah, I side on the community. I will side with the community. Like, you gave me access to your story and you allowed me into it. And I'm so thankful for that. And I want to make sure that you're protected. So that's how I have to go about it sometimes.
Yeah, I think for myself as well, consent's really important, especially when I'm working with community members that, well, any community members on any kind of project. But I think like when I'm thinking about like kind of traditional knowledges, which is kind of what I think about when I think about this, it's a lot of kind of like making sure there's a lot of communication with like elders in my community and making sure that the knowledges that I'm sharing won't do harm because so often times knowledges are taken out of our communities without our consent, and to help make other people either wealthy or to expand their knowledge. And it's just like this extraction of knowledge. And so I'm really conscientious of that when I'm working with traditional knowledges, but also with like Indigenous communities, because that's happened to us since contact. And it's just a reality that takes a lot of intention and consideration when you're working with these communities, right? And making sure that the work that you're doing is supporting and uplifting these communities and not doing harm to them. So it's something that takes a lot of kind of collaboration and communication and consent.
Delita, do you want to, if you want to add anything, I want to make sure.
No, I guess because I'm in the studio creating the work, and I feel like I'm addressing the Black body, the Black male body. I don't think there's really anything that I put in my work that I have to question, nor have I received any questioning from anyone in regards to the content and the context of my work. So I can't honestly say that I've ever faced any issues on that standpoint.
Thank you. We have a question, and I want to use this moment to remind folks, attendees in the chat, that you're welcome to ask questions at any point, and we'll try to get to all of them as they come in. So this one is very good, timely, as far as this person asking, can you talk about a time where you think your work has better informed folks who do not share your identities and created more allies / accomplices to help with your communities?
I think that I share identities with most folks, whether it be like the piece on EI, I believe that I have an interesting role in that piece because like my mother is working class, she works at a factory. So I feel like I have a relation to that. And I make most things about my identity, whether it is being like non-binary, whether it's about class, whether it's about being female, like I don't feel right personally otherwise, because I personally don't feel okay speaking for communities I'm not kind of a part of. But that is to each their own, but yeah.
Real quick, I want to let me just clarify. I think Liz wanted to clarify in the chat the question. Can you talk about the time where you think your work has better informed folks, like folks who do not share the identity? So someone like who is not, this work is not about specifically, to see and maybe created an ally out of someone who may not have known much about your community.
So my work has a lot of symbolism in it. I use circles, I use birds, I use mason jars and vessels and botanicals and all sorts of things that I have a particular visual vocabulary that has a definition to it. These are all objects and items that I think everyone in the world has pretty much had access to. And I think that is what makes my work universal in that way. So when someone talks to me about my work, which is very important to me, because one of the most important things to me in my work is the conversation, to start the conversation. You don't have to agree, you can disagree, that's fine, but the conversation has started, and that's the importance of it. So I think that because these symbols are in my work, and I'm happy to tell people what they mean to me, they can also identify and share stories. So I've had that experience where people are like, oh, they see the mason jar and they're very curious about why it's in my work. And when I share with them my story, then they share their story. So the whole conversation becomes universal. So you have had a glimpse into behind the veil of an African-American woman, and yet you were able to share whatever your experience has been with these particular objects or whatever it is you've seen in my work.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think a lot of my work, I hope, does this, because I feel like with every piece I create, I'm just really trying to center Indigenous knowledges, and specifically Navajo knowledges, and also like Indigenous experiences, and also politics. So I think just the first thing that's kind of coming to mind is I created this installation for this show in Victoria, BC, which is Lekwungen territory. And the show was called Land Back. And it was basically a show that was exploring the land back movement, which is basically that all stolen Indigenous land will be returned to Indigenous people in specifically in this context of land back in like what's now known as North America. And so I created this work that was kind of bringing in a personal story from my home community about a land protector who was in my family. And I created this big like transporter pad because I was also working within like Indigenous futurisms at the time. And it was a piece that had all of these kind of stories woven into it. And you could actually walk inside of this transporter pad, and at the base of it was earth from my home territory. And the main central figure in the work was this time traveling land protector who was one of my ancestors. And so the work did this kind of cool thing, I hope, where it kind of talked about this kind of historical story in my own family about Atsaanelli, who was a land protector during the Long Walk when the Navajo were forcibly removed from our homelands and territories and forced to walk over like 300 miles to eastern New Mexico. We were pretty much like interned there for years. And we were really lucky that we were able to go back home. And this was in the 1860s. But this ancestor of mine like escaped from the Long Walk and was able to return home. And then she became like this elder and matriarch in our community who protected our community from the US Army, from this happening again, and also from other raiding nations. And sorry, this is a long-winded story, but just to kind of talk about, like, I was kind of in the work bringing forward this story and this history that I think a lot of people like to gloss over when they think about the history of America. Like, they don't like to think about that violence of how many Indigenous nations were removed from their home territories, and many of them never were able to return, and how intimately connected that history is to the current land back movement. And because of this show, I was able to kind of tell these stories and also dream into the future about worlds where maybe land back can be a reality. And what could that look like? And so when I think about how that might have, like, you know, those stories and that kind of storytelling invited people into those dialogues and into that history, and the work was like really glitzy and like kind of pretty and immersive. So I think it was like this visual way of kind of being totally immersed in these realities. And I heard from like the curator and the gallery owner that a lot of people had like very kind of emotional experiences in my installation. So I hope that there were allies who came out of that. But I think it just goes to show that art can be like an entry point for people to really engage with these social political issues that our communities are facing, and just like at least start from there and like go forth and change the world, hopefully. Yeah.
I like that. Start from there and go forth. Oh, Miru, did you want to add on something on that? I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, I think I misinterpreted the question, but something that really stood out for me was I wrote a piece about being like I just started identifying as non-binary during the pandemic, when I experienced extreme isolation and realized we're still in a pandemic, but during the height of the pandemic, when I experienced extreme isolation, and I wrote about it, and I shared the piece of writing it's funny, with my friends. And I think that they were my friends before, but they're allies now, because in the ways in which they were more intentional about my name change or asking questions, you could tell that there was more of an invested interest. Because honestly, I think the most powerful thing that you can share with people is your lived experience, is your personal story. And that is, some people just don't know how to empathize, I guess, or maybe they do, but they don't practice it. But I think that writing it down and having an understanding of what was going through my head and my experiences on an everyday level really helped even my friends. And so that was incredibly powerful to see the ways in which they were more gender affirming after I wrote that piece.
No, that's amazing. I like what you said about like from friends to like allies. And I think that's very much the heart of that question, like turning how people turn from friends or outsiders to allies. And so each of you is creating art. I think we all are creating different types of art, walking in different fields of social change and different issues. And I want to take a moment to ask a little about how y'all see, just either from this conversation or from if y'all have seen each other's work before, how y'all have see your work overlapping, either the issues you talk about and you work on overlapping, or your visual vocabularies, as Delita had said, or filmmaking and writing and multimedia art.
I think the work overlaps in that we're all visual storytellers. We're all storytellers, and we found our voices through various mediums that we practice in. So I think that that's the biggest and most obvious overlap there.
I think also, I totally agree with that. And I think also like the fact that we're all kind of living in this like settler colonial society and existing and still creating from our cultures and our traditions and our stories and our family histories. Like that's such a radical act of resistance against these colonial powers that have tried for so long to erase us, you know? And so I see a lot of solidarity there because of that. And I think there's a lot of room for more solidarity as well in the future. Yeah.
I think I see that, as you said earlier, Lily, like the personal informs the political. It feels like the ways in which we approach our art is definitely informed by our experiences, which are informed by our identities. And yeah, we use our own mediums to communicate that. And that's a really incredible thing.
Thank you. And we've got a great question, another great question. That many of us want to be artists, but we are worried about how to pay bills or provide for our needs. Got any tips or hints? How does this process play out in your life? And I would just add on to that question that for the young artists or the storytellers or the folks who want to create social change in attendance today, and any advice or what you hope that they take away from this panel?
I hope that people understand that their stories are just as important as mine or anyone else's on this panel, and that they can have just as great of an impact as we have and others before us have had. I think that's what I would want people to take away from this panel.
I guess I would say I totally feel you that living as an artist can be kind of scary in terms of being able to, yeah, like support yourself and provide for yourself. But I think that's where you have to kind of use that superpower that we have as artists to be creative and be able to think maybe more expansively about being an artist than you would have maybe when you started out this journey of wanting to be an artist. I think for me, the reason that I can even exist and live as an artist is because I've been really opening to kind of, I've been open to like following different paths that maybe I wasn't quite sure at the beginning. Like I really wanted to go down, like maybe like book illustration, for example. Like I was so nervous when I started out and when I was first asked to illustrate a book, and but I like took that jump and trusted in myself that like, okay, as an artist, like I feel like I have the creative wherewithal to be able to like do this project, and to kind of realize you're not going to just have all of these skills all at once. Like it's all about building up like experience, and sometimes experience can be more helpful than talent in some cases, even as an artist. And I think being able to kind of keep that in mind when you're like thinking about pursuing this kind of like path is really important. And if there's something I hope you could take away, it's that there's a lot of power in art because we have this ability to dream about how we want our present realities to be different, but also how we want the future to be different. And I feel like art creates an avenue where we can kind of explore those possibilities, whether that's in really small ways that are really like personal and about like your own lived experiences and working through that, or whether it's like big societal changes and shifts. But every single dream towards those changed realities is really important because it all kind of contributes to the like mosaic and like the complexity of our lives, right? So every little piece really does help, and I hope you can take that away, I guess.
In terms of making a living, so I did my policy degree and I worked at these consulting jobs and for the government, and I honestly was not having it. It was not making me happy. I just knew it. My soul felt like it was decaying. And I knew that, well, first I have a job now that I work, and it's a lot more in line with giving me the space and room to pursue my art, but as well as being a job I care about that's doing social change in the world. And so I think there's a way to balance both of those things. There's a lot of artists who pursue part-time work and just work, you know, on their art and dedicate their time for that. I just strongly recommend that you pursue what makes you happy. I think that I'm saying this so much because I wish someone told me this, but it's your life. I also think that I'm 27 right now, but even if I didn't switch to art at whatever 25, we have so much life to live. And so it's never too late to pursue your art as well. If you find that you're not enjoying your, academic path, or that you're not enjoying your career, you can always switch into art or keep it up on the side. It's always an option. Things that I wish people yes, advice, I suppose. Internet is so huge. And I used to write like all my deep thoughts on the internet. And I really wish someone told me to go freaking buy a journal instead of putting it on the internet, because not everyone needs to know what I'm going through or my art. And you definitely don't need to be putting it out there for free, because copy and paste is real. So protect your art, and protect yourself. And I was not that great writer before I became a good writer. So I wrote like every day. I wrote all the time. And eventually, there started to be form, and I understood structure, and I started to become a good writer, whatever that means. But it is very much a dedication. It's not just going to come. Some people may be born with it. I wasn't. So, but I think that that's something that you just have to work out, just like a muscle. You have to work it out. So those are just things that I think people should sit with.
I think I wanted to add that it's totally possible to live and function as a creative. I've been doing it for a number of years. I think that the system that we have in place, particularly here in the States, is that, that's a hobby. You can't live and, sustain a family with that type of practice. That couldn't be further from the truth. However, the path that I took to get here may not be the path for everyone else. And I think it's important that people understand that, but at the same time, talk to other creatives who are being successful, particularly in areas that you want to be successful in. Glean off the information you can and discard the rest. And but it can be done. So I did want to add that.
No, thank you for adding that. When you said that about the system of like us seeing art as a hobby, it made me think about how a lot of y'all's work, especially social justice wise, is deconstructing systems in the US. And why not deconstruct the system of art seen as a hobby and not as a career path and as social change? And I want to, we got one last question, because I want to make sure we get to this last question in the Q&A from one of our student leadership committee members. Do you have any advice for those of us that are artists and want to help the fight for social justice, especially in the humanities and in activism?
Keep creating work. I think that's the important thing. I think in terms of, making a difference, making a change, having a career as a creative, the important thing is to do the work first and foremost. And I think everything else will fall into place from there.
And I would say tie into those communities. So if there's something you're really passionate about, or like a social cause that you really want to get involved in, get involved with it, see who's working in the field, who are the people, because art is always needed in all of these movements. When I was up in Victoria, I was supporting with a lot of land defense work. And I was constantly being called upon for just basic art things that were needed for the movement. but then it also helped informed me to be like, okay, this is a really important issue to me, and this is how I want to talk about it in my practice. So it's just like, you got to get in there. You got to get in there.
I think, yeah, I would echo both of those forms of advice. I would also say just your experiences will definitely help you develop your art. So I feel like, yeah, the entering different spaces, just traveling, talking to people, I think that all those things will inform your art. It's something that's created out of an accumulation of knowledge, so, and practice. Yeah.
All right, then I think that's all of our questions, all of our time. If we could all give virtual snaps and claps to our 3 amazing panelists. I will, let me see. In the chat, I'm going to drop our little post-event feedback form. We'd love to hear from y'all about what you got from today, how you enjoyed the program. I'm going to give a last big thank you to our amazing panelists. I'm going to give a big thank you to all of our co-sponsors who helped make this event possible. I'm going to share my screen one last time just to show y'all, if y'all enjoyed today's event, we've got more programming that happens on a weekly basis, such as the Women of Color discussion on Mondays, our Feminist Fridays on Friday, and upcoming, we have an upcoming event we have tomorrow at 1:30 p.m., a panel on intersex justice and disability. And so I just wanted to thank you all again. Thank you to our panelists and for everyone for showing up. We feel very lucky to have had some time with y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.